Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Head of Sports Science at Swansea City Football Club, Jonny Northeast. This episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is sponsored by simplyfaster.com, and that's spelled SIMPLI faster.com. So alongside the free lap timing systems, simplyfaster.com currently holds the eccentric K-Box. So if you haven't heard of the K-Box, it's a new product that uses flywheel technology to allow higher velocity eccentric overload. So I saw the K-Box for the first time when Mike Young from the US brought a couple over for one of his workshops in Gloucester. So off the back of that, I was really keen to use one, and I actually got my hands on one and was able to spend a couple of hours playing around with lots of different exercises and getting used to the K-Box. So from personal experience, getting out of the bottom of the squat, powering up and having the K-Box pull you through the floor on the way down is absolutely incredible. So basically, the harder you go on the concentric portion of the lift, the more it's going to give you on the eccentric. So if you're going to go for it, you're going to get pulled through the floor. At simplyfaster.com, there's also a great blog from Frederick, who is one of the co-owners of Eccentric, so you can learn more about the K-Box there. So if you are interested in getting a K-Box, get to simplyfaster.com, so that's SIMPLI faster.com, and get a K-Box for yourself. So today we've got Jonny Northeast on, who is Head of Sports Science at Swansea City Football Club. So as I mentioned in the episode, I think it's the fifth or sixth guy that has come around from the meetings in Seattle at the Seattle Sounders Sports Science Conference in the summer. So it's great to catch up with Jonny again, because we had a really good chat in Seattle, but again, not enough time to get into the nuts and bolts of things, so I had to get him on the podcast to discuss everything else and what he's currently doing. So there's a great article in The Guardian which highlighted the great work that Jonny's doing at Swansea City. So that I've put a link on the website at paceyperformance.co.uk/53. So you can check that article out. It goes into a lot of what we discussed in the podcast, so with regards to pre-season and recovery. So one cool thing that I've got to offer you today is Keir Wenham-Flatt, who is the head strength coach at Argentine Rugby Union. He's coming to the UK to do some seminars, two seminars, one in Belfast and one in Hartpury in Gloucestershire. So I've got some discount codes for listeners. So if you do want to go to Belfast and listen to Keir speak for the weekend, you can put in Pacey1 when you check out at his seminar page, which will be at rugbystrengthcoach.com. If you do want to go to Hartpury in Gloucestershire, you can put in Pacey2, and that'll give you the discount there. So it'll be a really good weekend with Keir. I think it's 10 till 6, both Saturday and Sunday, with an evening social on the Saturday night. So I've heard him speak before and listened to his podcast, spoke to him in person. Great guy, and he's got so much to share, and I'm really glad he's kind of putting himself out there and teaching people. And so that'll be great. So get on it, and there's discount codes which you can take advantage of. So thanks to Keir for providing you listeners with that. And don't forget, you can also book onto the Pacey Performance webinar series with Dan Baker. So that is now on Saturday the 10th of October at 10 a.m. British Summer Time. So a little bit of a situation with Dan and a little bit of travelling that he's got to do extra. So that's the reason for the change of date. But if you go to paceyperformance.co.uk/Dan Baker, you can book on there. And I've seen some of the slides and spoke to Dan this morning, and it's going to be a really good event, even though we have had to change the date. So get over to paceyperformance.co.uk/Dan Baker. So back onto the episode with Jonny. We discuss CPD for coaches, obviously a big topic for us too, because we met out in Seattle. His current role with Swansea and the Wales squad. We discuss planning pre-season, which ties in nicely with the article from The Guardian. We discuss recovery methods, warm-ups for football, and difference between working with under-21s and first-team players. So I hope you enjoy the chat with Jonny. I'd love to hear your feedback. We both love to hear your feedback on this episode. So drop us a message on Twitter at Pacey Perform, or for Jonny, it's J_Northeast on Twitter. So I hope you enjoy the chat with Jonny, and I will speak to you soon. Hi guys, welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today we've got Jonny Northeast, who is the Head of Sports Science at Swansea City Football Club. So again, I think for the maybe fourth or fifth time, piggybacking on contacts made in Seattle. Obviously Jonny was out there and we had a good chat out there, so I had to get him on the podcast. So welcome to the podcast, Jonny.
Hi Rob, thanks for getting me on board.
Absolute pleasure. So do you want to just give us a bit of an introduction on your background, your education, and what you're currently doing?
So started off, left college, didn't really have a career path that I wanted to follow, so I got an opportunity to sort of take on board an apprenticeship in personal training. So I did that, worked in the local gym for a year, realised I wanted to do it, but I didn't really want to work in a gym. So I did a bit of research around, found out there was a sort of course down in Newark, which is now Cardiff Met now, doing sports conditioning, rehab and massage. So I did that for 3 years now. In the third year of that, I had the opportunity to take on 100 hours work experience. Now, they laid on a few sort of internships that we could take on board. One of them was with the Swans. So I took on board that for 100 hours. Great opportunity for me to do that, really. So I learned a hell of a lot in that 100 hours, more than what probably I did in the whole course at university. That's not to say that university was a waste of time. It's just putting up the practical elements to what we learned in the textbook, really. But that was only part-time. So I realised I needed to get more embedded in the culture. So I took on board a full-time internship the year after that with the Swans. Working every day, working under Ryder Morgans at the time, who's now at Liverpool. Really enjoyed it. Value for money, I'd recommend it to anyone. After that, got offered the opportunity to be under 21's development team head sports scientist. So I did that for 2 years. Whilst doing that, I got very close with Gary, who's now the first team manager. But when he took over the helm of the first team, he asked me, did I want to get involved and take over the first team, which I jumped at the chance, which is where I'm at today, really. Whilst doing that, sort of still doing my master's at the moment in sports science down at Swansea University, with the main emphasis on looking at speed and agility in soccer players. So that's where I'm at today, really.
So you said you got close with Gary Monk. What did he get an interest in sports science? How did that kind of relationship come about?
Well, when I was doing, obviously, I worked with him when I was doing my internship for that year when we first reached the Premiership. So I sort of had a sort of relationship with him from that. But then he was doing his coaching badges at the time. So there's a lot of elements, especially in the FAW, of the sports science side of it. So we have to answer a few questions relating back to the methodology on pitch sizes and areas and durations. So we used to sit down quite a bit and talk through that, and that's where we sort of built that link up together, really. Cool.
So what's it like as a first team manager at the minute? Still into his sports science?
Yeah, for me, it's a perfect coach to work with at the moment, just purely because he's very forward thinking. He gives me the role and responsibilities to be able to do what I need to do, respects sports science, and allows us to sort of bring in new ideas and try new ideas out, and also respects what we're trying to do on a day-to-day basis, whether it be through the GPS or any gym-based activities. He takes a full notice on what we're doing and tries to take that on board with everything he does as well.
So you got involved with Wales recently. So what age groups was that with, and how did that come about?
So I was very fortunate. I had a conversation with one of the intermediate managers. He was down at the training ground a couple of weeks ago. He said about needing the under 19 sports scientists for one of the camps coming up last week. So I just sort of jumped at the chance of getting involved with that. Had a week away last week with the 19s against Poland, so it was a very good, insightful week working at international level.
Cool. Sounds good. So is that becoming full time, or is that still a kind of a part time role? Just filling in?
It's a part time role at the moment. So it was a friendly that we had last week. So hopefully it progresses into something more full time, but I'll find out in the near future. Really. So hopefully it's across.
Cool. So just with regards to international football, you're obviously quite relatively new into it, but hopefully moving forward into it as well. So with the managing a training week when players are on international duty, how are you as a sports scientist managing them lads all coming from all different parts of the country into one place, all at different points in the fitness? How are you managing that training week building up to a match?
I think the biggest thing is obviously you've got to do your research. You've got to look at what the players have done, ask the questions before they reach the camp, or what they've done building up to the camp. So you've got, obviously, like you mentioned, you've got players at different fitness levels, especially at a younger age group. Do they have under 21s? Do they have an under 19 side in their academies? So some of the kids haven't played games since pre-season. So it's important to do your research on where they are, the fitness levels, building up to that. And also you've got to respect the fact that they're not your players. They belong to their parent clubs. So we've got to respect what they do at their clubs and try and bring that into the same culture that we're trying to achieve. So reaching out to their clubs and speaking to their fitness coaches, any programs that they can do, and bring them on camp with them. So they're not disregarding the things that they do on a day-to-day basis away with them, but then also trying to fit that into the program that obviously the international manager they're trying to do on a week-to-week basis. But on the mainstay, we're not trying to improve fitness during that week as a maintenance week, or just trying to get through to the game in one piece, but trying to integrate what they do on their week-to-week basis away with their own clubs.
So when you mention about bringing their program over to you guys, is that regards to what they do kind of pre-training, post-training?
Yeah, massively. So obviously each player comes with their own injury history, their own training ages. So it's important that we try to give them some consistency in their programs. So a lot of them will come to the camp with their own pre-activation exercises. Some of them will have their own gym exercises, their own recovery strategies in place. So it's important we're trying to give them that consistency and that we carry across what they do in their clubs with the international stage. Because like we said, they're not our players at the end of the day, so we have to respect what they do on a week-to-week basis with their own clubs and try and carry that on board with us, just so we get the continuity on board with the players.
Mm-hmm. So how much contact are you having with their respective sports scientists at their parent clubs? Are you going through that research process with them?
Yeah, so with all the contacts we've got on board, we try to reach out to the sports scientists at least a week in advance, depending on when we get the squad list through. So as soon as we get that squad list through, we reach out to the sports scientists, try and get some sort of training load history for the 2 weeks prior to the camp. And then obviously any pre-activation, post-training, any flexibility, mobility programs, any weights programs they may have. We try to get a little profile together of all the players that come on board and try and slot them into the schedule for the week so that they can continue their programs with us and go back to their clubs in the same shape that they arrived with us.
So as a head of sports science at a club, when maybe you get contact from the English guys or various other countries that are coming to your club to take your players to their respective countries, what other information are you passing on to them to make sure your players are looked after?
As much information as we can. So from my side of it, I'll give across anything I can in terms of training load. So GPS metrics, anything that we deem necessary for them to see. Obviously, we can give away everything that we do, but we give away the main metrics that we deem appropriate for them to find out. We'll give away obviously the playing minutes they would have done over the last few weeks. Any pre-activation work from my side, weights programs if they can do. Obviously, schedules determine whether they can or can't do that. And that's the main bulk of what we'll give across from our side. And then obviously the physio will give across their their side of it, their injury prevention work, any injury history over the last couple of weeks leading up to the camp. So we're fairly close in terms of our multidisciplinary team. We're quite close. We talk together. We pass across the information. We try and give across as much as we can to build a big picture on our players, so our players don't go away for the week and come back in a worse shape than what they've gone away with.
So you had a bit of good publicity over the summer with regards to your pre-season. So I'd just like to discuss a little bit about how you go about formulating a plan for pre-season, who's involved, where do you start, and how do you kind of build that picture?
Yeah, so for us, pre-season started fairly early this year in terms of planning wise. We started planning around February time. So we had a bit of a picture of where we were going to go in terms of tours. And I was sent out to a couple of places to do a recce, if you like, on the training facilities. So Gary sent me out to a couple of places to have a look at the facilities, see if they were acceptable for us to train there or not. Obviously feed that back to the manager. And once we had that in place, then there's a lot of talk between myself and the coaching staff in terms of their game model, if you like. So Gary and the coaches have a particular way of how they want the team to play. I think that's necessary. That's important for you to get grips of what they want to do with the team. If they want to play a high pressing style, if they want to be a counter-attacking team, that's important to how we go and condition the players. So once we sat down and had the conversations of that, we went away. We planned pre-season in terms from start to finish. That's not to say once we planned, that was how the pre-season went, because once we did the pre-season testing, if you like, we highlighted weaknesses in the squad and what we need to train to get the best out of the players. So we had our structure in place approaching pre-season, but once we'd done the first 2 days of testing, if you like, we had to change our plans just slightly to adhere to what we found in our testing protocols, which I think is important, because I think if you go a lot of the time, people do their testing days and they don't really act upon their testing. What we found is there was a weakness in our squad, and we focused solely on that weakness to get the best out of the players after the end of the pre-season.
You might not be able to answer this. You might be able to answer in more of a kind of a general sense. But when you say the lads are coming back and doing the testing that you're talking about, what kind of things are you looking for as a sports scientist that may then guide your pre-season?
Yeah, so obviously you do your basic test, your VO2 max test. We're quite fortunate we have a close relationship with the local university in Swansea, so we've done a lot of testing down there. So we've done a speed, agility tests, and we've done a lot of strength profiling tests. So we did a few of our jump tests. We've done our isometric mid-thigh pull test, and a lot of that sort of highlighted weaknesses within our squad. We found out where our strengths were. We found out where our weaknesses were, and it was important for us to focus on those weaknesses to get the best out towards that game model of what Gary was talking about at the start of pre-season. So once we got that in place, we then sat down straight after testing, re-evaluated where our plans were for pre-season, and then progressed it forward. But like I said, with Gary being a very forward-thinking manager, he understands the process of how important sports science can be to pre-season. So he allowed us really that first week to build the players up. So each day had a different stimulus for the days. So we never really chucked the players in at the deep end. We just built them up through that first week to work with through accels, decels, change of direction, max speeds. And then once we did that process, we then handed them over to the coaches then into full training.
So you just want to talk us through that first week of training, because hopefully it may be similar to what people are hearing elsewhere, but then again, it might be a little bit different. So do you just want to talk us through that first week?
Yeah, so the first week for us, we had 2 days of testing, if you like. So we had 1 day of testing with the medical staff, where they ran through them MSK testing. Then they passed over to us on the second day, where we done our VO2 tests and we done our strength tests. And then after that, we had 1 day where we were just doing straight line running. obviously it's important for us to get the balls out from day one. So at the end of the day, they're footballers. They're not long distance runners, and I don't think you'll ever find a tree on a football pitch. So it's important to get the balls out from day one, just to allow the players to feel that they're back in training. So everything we did was just straight line running for the first day, with balls as much as we can. The second day we went into a bit of change of direction, again implementing the balls where we can as much as possible. Third day, XLs, decels, and then on the fourth day, some max speed work, and then back into the training after that. So we're kind of fortunate in the fact that the coaching staff allow us to have that time with the players to build them up. But I think it's crucial that you build them up slowly through that first week, because you don't want to break them down in that first week. And if you've got no players to train, you're not going to get players fit. So I think you've got to keep the players as fit as possible in that first week by building them up slowly, where coaches allow you to do it.
So when you talk about the kind of change direction stuff that you did, I think maybe you said day 2 or day 3. How do you present that to the players? Is that in the form of like a small-sided game? Is that a very closed drill? What's that look like?
Obviously, you have your physical element, so they do their sort of running element with me beforehand, and then you start integrating them into just a basic possession after that. Obviously, that possession builds up through the week, so you won't get them to chuck them straight into a small-sided game, because the demands of the small-sided game is going to be a lot more than it would on a basic possession. So starting off with a basic possession and then building them up through the week into that small-sided game at the end of the week, once they've sort of coped with the demands of a small possession first. But then presenting to the players, Gary was very fortunate. Well, Gary was good in allowing me to present to the boys on a daily basis before training. So every day had an emphasis. Players were all given targets on that day and fed back the GPS from the previous day. So we kind of created that accountable culture within the group. So players can then look at their teammates, whether they're pulling their weight, whether they're not pulling their weight, and then sort of start to rely on them once it comes to game day from there.
So presenting data to players, what kind of, I know you mentioned GPS there, what kind of metrics are you feeding back to the players, and how are you presenting it pre-training?
Yeah, so every morning before training, we'd have a sort of 15-20 minute presentation with the boys. So depending on what the emphasis of the day before was, would depend on the feedback that we'll give to the boys. So if it was change of direction work, you're sort of looking more at player loading. If you're looking at XLD cells, you look at the XLD cells and the GPS. So it depends on the emphasis of the day before. Depends on what the feedback we gave them. But I think it's crucial in terms of the player buy-in to engage them by feeding back to them, because we spend a lot of time and rely a lot of time on players to give us feedback and give them GPS units to wear. But if they don't get the feedback from it, they're not going to buy into it. So I think a lot of the time is giving them back, and we still do it to this day. We don't do the presentations every day on a daily basis in season, but we'll feed back on a day-to-day basis on the GPS and what they've hit and where they've hit in relation to their targets as well. So, and I think it creates that competitive culture within the group, is what you're trying to achieve, really. At the end of the day, they're all footballers. They're all there for a reason. They're all competitors, so they want to see themselves beating the man next to them. So any chance we can create that creative culture, that competitive culture in the team, better for the team, really.
So at what point in the whole of pre-season, and at what point in the week does strength and power fit into your plan? And are you still trying to create that competitiveness within that environment as well as out on the pitch with the GPS?
Yeah, so obviously I mentioned we did the strength profiling test for the boys on the second day of pre-season. So what that allowed us to do was to highlight individualized training programs for the boys and where they needed to work on. So I mentioned we did the isometric mid-thigh pull. So from that, we managed to gauge a real sense of which route we need to go with each player, where they need to work on strength, power, rate, force development. So as soon as we got that feedback, we tried to integrate that as much as we can into the group from day one. Ultimately, obviously, you have to take into account on the players and their training history and their training age. we try not to include that competitive element such early on in pre-season, but once they get used to the lifts and they become more competent at the technical competencies of the lifts, then we can start integrating those competitions into the training session.
So when the lads come back from pre-season, how are you? How are they? Have they done a lot of work over the summer with regards to the strength and power work? Is it a lot of maintenance work? What kind of things are you giving them to allow them to build up, and on that second day of testing, be ready to do all that strength profiling that you talk about?
Yes, so they've all got their individualized training programs going away for the off season. So we try and give them about 2 weeks of the transition phase where it's complete rest, shut the body down, recoup, regenerate, and then ready to go again and build them up to the pre-season. Then, so after they've had that 2 weeks phase, then we start to build them up for the season. So I think that's just as important as your pre-season is that off season where you're building them up ready to start the pre-season. They need to be at appropriate level, ready to start on that day one, really. So we've highlighted where they needed to work on. We sat down one-to-one with the boys at the end of the season. We sort of came to a bit of a sort of a mutual feedback, really. They said back to us what they felt they needed to improve on. We said to them what they felt we needed them to improve on ourselves from the outside looking in. And then we came together with a training program. So I think it's important they need to have a say in what they're doing as well. I think you've got to build up trust up with the players, so they see that you're listening to them, but then you're also giving them sort of empowering the players to think that they're making the right decisions at the same time, rather than it's the whole, I'm telling them what to do the whole time. They need to have some sort of, even though you might be pushing them towards that way where you're making the decision, you make them feel that they've made the decision themselves. I think it's vital for them to buy in and to adhere to the programs that you give them in the off season.
So after that isometric mid-thigh pull, you're guiding each group of players down a certain route. So there's a number of different programs based off that test.
Yeah, that test along with the counter-movement jumps, single leg jumps and drop jumps as well. So we've done a whole batch of tests, if you like. We've got a full picture of the players, like a strength profile for every player that we've got. And then from that, we try to, it's hard to individualize for a team of 30, but you can get them into stations within the gym to work on their own sort of programs. You can modify the loads, the reps, the sets, and the lifts depending on where they need to go. But we tend to work in small groups in the gym so we get the best out of them and make sure it's individualized to them. And obviously, if they see it's individualized, they like it because it's purely to them. There's that culture where it's all about them. So if we make things for them, they're going to buy into it a lot more.
So obviously pre-season's a time where obviously training load's very high. How are you implementing recovery methods, and what kind of recovery methods are you giving the lads post-training, post-games?
Yeah, so obviously we had a bit of a press from the snooze boxes that we put onto the training this pre-season. We kind of stumbled across that this pre-season, if I'm honest with you. We were supposed to we normally have a 2-3 week tour camp, if you like, away from the training ground. We didn't have that this year, so we only had a week away. But what we find is we normally go away for that first 2 weeks where the volume's high, so we can monitor the whole picture, if you like. We can modify the food, their sleep, make sure they go back to the hotel during the days when we're training double sessions. But because we were at the training ground, we didn't have that benefit, if you like. So what we tried to do, we stumbled across it on the internet, and I mentioned it to the manager. Right, we got this option. There's this option. We could do this, and we managed to bring it on board. It worked out fairly well for us because they never worked in sport before. So it worked out like a mutual agreement that we managed to get them on board with us. So that was the main one, if you like. That's the one that created the headlines that we got the snooze boxes on board. So we made sure players were training in the morning, gave them enough time in between sessions where they could go and utilise the snooze boxes, get their afternoon nap between training, and then come back for the afternoon session. We're fairly lucky we managed to build up a good working relationship with Pacey. So that's a little link to them, really. So they worked very closely with us this pre-season, making sure that every player's got appropriate supplementation where they need it. So working closely with a doctor, any deficiencies players may have in certain aspects, we make sure that they're getting appropriate recovery strategies to what that they need post-training. And those are the two main ones, if you like, during pre-season: sleep and nutrition. That's the one we make sure we get those right, I think, because they underpin everything you're trying to do. During pre-season, I think it's risky when you talk about recovery strategies too much, because you also want the adaptations to occur. If you're giving too much recovery post-training, between sessions, I think you're going to stop that adaptation happening, which is what you're going to reap the benefits from over the pre-season, if you like. So things like ice baths and massages, we try to limit as much as we can during that early stages of pre-season, because we're trying to load those muscles and those tendons to deal with the demands of match play. But from the main two, nutrition and sleep for us are the main ones, and those are the ones we adhere to throughout the whole season, if you like.
So just going back from my experience playing days, you get a couple of guys, I'm sure you've got them on your team, who are religiously in the ice bath after every single training session, every single game, and that's just what they do. So how are you kind of guiding them to maybe stay away from it? How are you educating these guys to the benefits of not doing something that they think is the best thing to do?
Wherever you work in whatever sport, whatever industry, you're going to have people with routines of what they've always done in their lives, in their careers. So that's always going to be a factor you're going to have to adhere to sort of work around. So we spend most of my job, if you like, is educating them to make the right decisions, whether it be on the training field, whether it be in the gym, whether it be in their lifestyles. So as much of my job is just educating the boys to try and make the right decisions. I mean, they might still go and do it, but as long as we've given them the tools to say, right, this may not be the best for you, try this instead. We always give them an alternative to try and work out. If they don't like it, they don't like it. But at least we've sort of tried to show them another aspect that's going to benefit them. Another one that's worked massively for us is the use of the iPads. So myself, the physios, our psychologists, we religiously put presentations onto their iPads. So whether they're bored at night, they can look onto their apps and their iPads and have a look and see if there's a new presentation up and try and educate them that way. I think as long as they can see what they're going to get out of doing something, then they'll try it. I think that's the biggest thing. As long as they know there's evidence out there to say this works, they're going to try it. If there's no evidence behind it and it's just a gadget or a whim, then they're not going to try it at all. We tried cryotherapy over the Christmas period last year. Trying to get the players in that was a big issue at first, just purely because they don't like the cold. So what we did a presentation. We brought in two things during that phase. We brought in passive heat maintenance and the cryotherapy. Presentation showed the research behind it, what it's going to do, how it helps, how it helps performance, how it helps recovery. And I think once they see that in front of them, they can make the choice themselves. If they want to do it, they'll do it. If they don't want to do it, they won't do it. But if there's someone that says to them, right, if you do this, you're going to perform better on a match day, I think they're more than likely going to make that decision, the right decision.
So when you mention about them presentations that are available on their iPads, are you somehow monitoring who's watching them, or is it just there? If they want it, great. If they don't, that's not a problem.
Yeah, we are monitoring it. So we're fortunate we've got someone on that works that's very good and handy with computers. So he's created a sort of a program for us, if you like, that helps us to monitor the players looking at their iPads. And also we can sort of test them when we speak to them on a day-to-day basis as well. I think that's vital. You've got to speak to the players. They're human beings. They just create that culture where you talk to them and just bring it up. Have you looked at your iPads recently? And if they say yes or no, or just, you know whether they looked at it or not just purely by speaking to them.
Mm-hmm. So that's obviously a big thing that only from my limited experience, but it's a big thing to create that culture that obviously must come from the manager, and that's something that's developed over time rather than just, okay, here's an iPad, here's a presentation, off you go. That's something that's, like I say, developed over time.
Yeah, I think, we had that bedding in period where Gary took over in February, and we had that we worked for 6 months. And then once pre-season came for the first full year, there we started day one with, this is the culture, this is how we're going to work. The first day of pre-season, everyone got handed their iPads, and it was set from then. Really, obviously, like you mentioned, you're going to have the manager set in the culture, and we're very fortunate that he set the culture, and this is how it works. Everyone who brings ideas to the table, every member of staff will have a sort of a responsibility, if you like, to make sure that happens within the squad. So the culture's embedded. Everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet. There's not one member of staff that wants to do something different. We're all sort of singing on the same hymn sheet and working towards the same goals. We've got a young group of staff that work with us. Everyone's motivated to want to achieve the best, which I think is key. Everyone sort of devotes their lives to the cause, if you like. We spend 10 months of the year with everyone, so I think it's key that everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet to create that culture. There's no one saying different words to another person within the camp.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So just going back to the snooze box and the nutrition side of things. So you're providing the snooze box. Are you actually monitoring how well they're sleeping, how long it is, the quality, and the nutrition side of things? How are you getting that information with regards to deficiencies? Are you doing blood tests? 2 questions.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, the first day of pre-season was the medical test, so the blood test would have happened then. So sitting down and speaking to the doctor about that side of it, you mentioned where we need to work on with certain players, what players need to do with their diets, and make sure and get appropriate nutrition on board. With the sleep side of it, when we had the snooze boxes on site, we didn't monitor sleep so much, if you like, just give them the opportunity to go and rest between sessions. But during the season, one thing we massively adhere to is making sure the players sleep, particularly the night before a game. So we monitor sleep that way. So we make sure every player wears a wristband, an activity band before they go to bed, especially on away games and home games, if you like. We monitor it every day before a game to make sure that players are getting the appropriate amount of rest leading up to that game. And that's throughout the season, especially areas of fixture congestion. We'll make sure they wear it for long periods of time. So Christmas, they might wear it for the whole month. We're just getting a day-to-day basis on how much they're sleeping, because it's important to their recovery. If they're not sleeping right, they're not going to get the appropriate recovery. And then on top of that, we modify training depending on to allow them to get the most sleep as possible. So if we're travelling late overnight, coming back from a game, we'll modify training to make sure it starts later the next day so that players are getting the appropriate amount of sleep. So we sing off the same hymn sheet. We will try to allow players to get as much sleep as possible and plus monitor it at the same time. So it's a huge part of what we do. Like I said, nutrition and sleep are vital to everything. It underpins the training that we work on.
Cool. So the activity band, what brand is that, and what other data is it giving you apart from the time they're in bed?
Yeah, so we decided to go down the route of using Fitbits, just purely because players like to see what they're wearing, if that makes sense. Obviously, we tried other brands out. There's a few brands where they had to wear it for a week before you could get feedback. And then obviously players, they're wearing it, but they're not getting anything back on it on a day-to-day basis. So we went with Fitbit just purely because they can look at it on their own iPhones, on their iPads. So they go into bed, they're sleeping. You're just creating that competitive culture from that alone. Players are looking at their phone and saying, I've had 9 hours sleep, and then looking at the next man next to them saying, I have more sleep than you. So it becomes a bit of a competitive culture on that as well, if that makes sense. So that's the reason why I went with Fitbit, just purely because players can see themselves on a day-to-day basis. They've had enough sleep or they've not had enough sleep, how intermittent their sleep was, or whether they slept right through. And then we can act on it on that point as well. So they just come back and feed it to us on a day-to-day basis when they enter the training ground. And then if they haven't enough sleep, can we give them any supplementation to then help and get them through that day of training or that game for that day? So obviously sleep depth is going to be a massive part of acting going forward in their recovery stages as well.
So with all this kit that is available to you guys to provide the players, obviously we talked a little bit about culture and a little period at the start that's getting the lads used to the things that they're doing, but how are they reacting to taking things home to where then you can see the day after?
Obviously, like you mentioned, the first few days when they're doing it, the first few times they do it, it's a bit of a big brother's watching me type thing. So we're spying on them, but it's purely for their benefit. It's not for our benefit. It's for their benefit to make sure they perform on the weekend. So we don't do it just to be annoying and it's an extra gadget. It's because there's evidence behind what we're doing. Once they see the benefit of it, we can show them how we're acting on it. If we don't do anything about it, them wearing it, then what's the point of them doing it? So if they haven't slept enough, we'll always make sure they get a supplementation the next morning to try and help combat that. If they've slept too much or whatever, we'll always act on what the feedback they give us so they can see that we're doing something with it. I think that's crucial. If we don't do anything with it, say, right, take a sleep band home with you tonight, and then tomorrow morning we don't ask them about it, then they're not going to do it. But if we go and ask them the next day, create that communication. What do you do before bed? Why didn't you sleep? Did you have something on your mind? Were you stressed? It becomes part of that sort of wellness questionnaire, sort of readiness to train type conversation as well. It just becomes part of the conversation. And then obviously once they start seeing the results happening and they're performing better on the weekend, that's your biggest buy-in tool. I think when you start pre-season and it's grinding on you, obviously you've got the snooze boxes on, you've got the nutrition on, you've got the Fitbit ready bands. Once this all comes together as that layering effect and then they get the result on the weekend, then it starts to sort of add up and they say, right, it's working, we'll carry on doing it. I think that's the biggest thing. If they see a result at the end of it all, then they'll carry on doing it. If they don't see the result, then they're not going to do it at all.
So last but not least, I just wanted to touch on, obviously you're just going back to the introduction, your progression from under 21 to first team. How does working with that group of players differ from working with first team in regards to schedule management and just with regards to kind of building relationships within that group or the two different groups?
Yeah, I think the main one, first point, is that results matter massively at first team. So you can't afford to get anything wrong. Training loads need to be 100% accurate. You need to turn every stone over to make sure you get the best out of the players on the weekend. When it comes to 21s, a lot of your emphasis is on making sure you're developing the player for the future. So you're more worried about increasing the speed, range of motion, improving strength, power, so they become that finished article at the end. Whereas it's almost, you buy the player at first team, they're already the player, so you need to maintain them and improve them where you can. 21s, you're trying to still get them to become that player. So you've got a lot more time on the training field with the 21s. With the first team, it's more rigid in terms of the training sessions. They're short, they're sharp, they're intense. Make sure the players get their conditioning hits on appropriate days. Make sure the training sessions don't overgo in time. And you don't have as much time with the players to do what you like with them. Players are in and out of the training ground between 9 and 12 o'clock, whereas for the 21s, you can have them from 9 till 5 if you like. What you say goes. Once they're first team players, they can do it. The power's in their hands, if you like. So if they wanted to become stronger athletes, they'll go in the gym themselves, whereas 21s, it becomes part of their day-to-day routine, if you like.
Cool. So I know I said last but not least, I've got another one. Obviously, we met over in Seattle. Why did you Why did you choose to go there? What do you think it offered you that maybe other things didn't? And it's obviously a long way to go just for a conference. And in the future, if you were going to do a similar thing, what would you be looking for a good kind of annual CPD event?
Yeah, so obviously I met you out in Seattle as well. And then obviously I spoke to Reese, you had on the podcast before. I used to work with him down at Swansea. We did the internship together. So he had very good words to say about the conference. So it was interesting to go across to America to see how things are done over there. If you like, you speak about the culture of the American lifestyle. They're far more outgoing. They're far open in terms of what they do. So it's interesting to see how it's done over there, how they approach each session with their lifestyles as well. So everything they do over there is on a far bigger, grander scale compared to ours. If you like, you look at their fans, especially with the NFL starting tonight as well, it's more of a showcase. So it was great to see how things are done in a different culture, if you like. I've been to a few courses over here, and it's nothing against how we do things. I think we're very enclosed about what we do. Everyone tries to everyone's keeps things to themselves. Rather, I think we need to be a bit more open with what we do. I mean, if you got the golden ticket, you'd be a multi-millionaire at the moment because everyone would want it. But how I do a coaching drill might be different to how you do a coaching drill. So it's different. If you are open with your ideas, I think it's vitally important to learn it, if you like, and get them moving forward.
Last but not least, again for the third time, any resources any books that you're reading that you'd kind of recommend? Any sites, obviously apart from the podcast, but we'll kind of brush past that. That's just a given. Any books or anything that you're reading at the minute?
Yeah, so alongside doing my MRes at the moment, obviously Exos is one I'm doing at the moment. I recommend that one as well. The performance certification, very good course. Just the whole methodology in it and the whole outcome, if you like, is the finished article. I think the way it's done online, you can either do your mentorship for a week or do it online, but I'm currently doing that online at the moment, so I think that's a very worthwhile course to do.
So where can people keep up to date with what you've got going on personally? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah, so I mainly use Twitter really, so it's J_Northeast is in the direction. And that's where I'm mostly on. I'm willing to give out my email address if they send me a direct message, and open to ideas because I like to talk to people and find out what other people are doing as well. Like I said, I like to be open with people. So if they're open with me, exchange ideas, get networking from there, really.
Cool. Happy days. Well, thanks for your time. Are you staying up for the NFL, like you say?
Yeah, I'll try to stay up and see how I get on, really. But I've got a long way I can travel, so.
Well, like I say, thank you for your time. And I'll put all the links to the things that you mentioned on the site so people can get in touch and see the kind of things you've been talking about. So thanks a lot. We'll keep in touch and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks for your time. Thank you.
See you, pal.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 53 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the chat with Jonny. Like I said at the start, we'd really appreciate your feedback on this episode, both myself and Jonny would. So if you want to drop us a message on Twitter, I'm at Pacey Perform and Jonny's at J_Northeast. Don't forget to get involved with discount code that I provided at the start. So if you want to go to Belfast and listen to Keir for the weekend, it's Pacey1 at checkout. And if you want to go to Hartbury in Gloucestershire, you can put Pacey2 and that will give you a discount. Both available at rugbystrengthcoach.com. And don't forget the Dan Baker webinar, which is on Saturday, the 10th of October. Go to paceyperformance.co.uk/Dan Baker. And I will speak to you in episode 54.